What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Here it is Friday, April 21st, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 with her unique perspective on the world. So getting right on into it, first of all, I put up a graphic on the top of whatreallyhappened.com, and it started out as kind of a joke. And it's a picture of Robert Kennedy. And in 1961, when John F. Kennedy became president, he appointed Robert Kennedy the Attorney General, and Robert Kennedy basically declared a war on organized crime. And on this illustration down at the bottom, it says, in 2017, it looks like organized crime won. And it was an attempt at humor, but the more I think about it, the more I think this explains everything that's been going on. Why scammers and cyber criminals are free to prey on the American people. Nobody's doing anything on about that. Companies are allowed to not only sell us dangerous products, but they get the government to force us to buy them. And if you start to realize that our government did lose the fight against organized crime and is now in the hands of organized crime, all of a sudden a lot of their behavior becomes very, very understandable indeed. All right, getting into the war zones, and I got to admit, I am very bummed out about the fact that I had really hoped that getting Donald Trump into the White House was going to derail the rush to war, and obviously that did not happen. And everybody is feeling the pressure, especially here in Hawaii. I've been talking to a lot of our friends and neighbors, and they all know war is coming. They all know the U.S. is pushing it, and they're all very concerned, of course, that we here in Hawaii could easily be hit. If it spirals out of control, which at this point, I don't see any way they can control it. So getting on to the news here, we're going to start with North Korea because everyone seems to think that's going to happen next. That's going to be the next big one. And we're looking at a story that came out of freebeacon.com. North Korean submarine missile program advances. This story seems to suggest that North Korea's submarine-launched missiles and missile-launching submarines are actually much further along than the earlier articles we linked to. Apparently, the KN-11 submarine-launched missile was one of those that was on display in the recent military parade, and they're talking about improvements that have been made to it. Originally, it was a liquid fuel rocket. Now it's solid fuel, which makes it easier to maintain, longer lasting, and just all-around general superior to a liquid fuel design. And apparently the Gore-class submarine. They've already got one that is in service, possibly two, and they're building others as well. And everybody is sort of clenching their teeth, clenching their hair with what's going on. Story coming out of CNN, with an eye on North Korea, China puts their bombers on high alert. And the gist here is that China is very concerned about a war in North Korea spilling across the border into their country. They remember when the U.S. went to war in Vietnam, how it spilled into Cambodia and Laos, and they want to make sure that what happens in North Korea stays in North Korea. So they've got their cruise missile-capable bombers on high alert as well. And again, the situation is very unstable. Now, Putin is sending troops to Russia's border with North Korea for the exact same reason. They're concerned that an attack on North Korea by the United States is going to trigger a flood of refugees, and they're looking at what the refugees from the already in progress U.S. wars in the Middle East have done to Europe. They do not want the same thing to happen to them. So they're fortifying the wall, again, to prevent overflow across the border. Now, the U.S. has sent what is called the Nuclear Sniffer aircraft to the east of the Korean Peninsula. Apparently it's going to be up on patrol. They're waiting for the seismographs to indicate there's been a nuclear test, and this WC-135 Constant Phoenix is a special purpose U.S. plane, and it's going to take air samples trying to collect particles of fallout that leak from the underground test to confirm there has been a nuclear explosion. Would they lie about such a thing? Yeah, they would. That's been their recent track record. Now, China is going along with trying to contain North Korea. They've already embargoed coal deliveries from North Korea, and now China is saying that if Kim Jong-un does not back down, they're going to embargo the crude oil supply. And North Korea relies almost entirely on China for oil, and China is saying that if Kim Jong-un doesn't back off, they're going to shut that valve. Now, getting on over into Syria, there's something kind of weird going on, because the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons only yesterday came on out and said they had confirmed the presence of sarin gas at the Idlib site. Now we're finding out nobody actually went there. The UN inspectors were not allowed to the actual site. The U.S. and their allies are blocking it. Nobody's allowed there. And so you have to wonder, what evidence did the OPCW claim they confirmed the use of sarin? Did somebody in the white helmets hand them a little swab and say, we took this at the site and you can test that? There's no chain of evidence there. And Assad is complaining the fact that the U.S. is not allowing any outside investigations. They're just out there saying, trust us, it's sarin, it's sarin, it's sarin, you will believe us. Would we lie to you? We're the U.S. government. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And Secretary of Defense Mattis is out there saying that despite the disarmament deal that Russia worked out with Syria years ago, we know that Syria still has chemical weapons, because obviously they had to have the chemical weapons to use on Idlib. It's circular logic, and it means absolutely nothing. And a lot of people are concerned that if Mattis is still out there saying Syria still has these chemical weapons, that there are going to be more false flags. Now, up in Russia, their Foreign Minister Lavrov is saying that the OPCW's block of an on-site probe shows the Western powers have gone back to the agenda of ousting Assad. And again, this underscores the absolutely ridiculous nature of that false flag story. Assad had almost defeated the U.S.-backed rebels. Peace talks were starting that would have guaranteed the continuance of his administration. Even the White House has said they were ready to accept President Assad continuing if he won his next election. There was no reason for Assad to do such a stupid thing, and every reason for the rebels to do it, to give the U.S. an excuse to escalate the situation and get back on the agenda of ousting Bashar al-Assad, which they've been trying to do for going on 6 years. Now, as you know, Donald Trump got up there and he was wiping his crocodile tears about the poor, beautiful babies who were killed at Idlib. And meanwhile, though, we know that a convoy of evacuees were literally lured into the open. They were lured off the buses with promise of treats and food, at which point they were bombed. And the attitude is, well, it's no big deal, and the U.S.-backed rebels who committed this atrocity are still being referred to as freedom fighters and rebels and moderates by the corporate media. Actually, they're moderately crazy people. But you can see the double standard. Dead babies that further the war agenda, they're going to make a big deal about. Dead babies that might harm the war agenda, just ignore. Just ignore, pretend they didn't exist. Now, apparently, the Syrian military has regained the initiative up in northern Hama. The U.S. strike on that Syrian airfield was a temporary setback, and the U.S.-backed rebels gained ground. Now they've lost it all, and the Syrian military has regained the initiative, and they're starting to push them back. Meanwhile, Bashar al-Assad is saying that the way the U.S. is organizing their forces, where in some places they seem to be helping ISIS, in other places they really are genuinely going after ISIS, it looks to Assad that Washington wants ISIS to wind up with the Syrian city of Deir ez-Zor. And they're already planning the balkanization of Syria to break it up into little tiny pieces that are easier to push around and bully, along with carving off a chunk for the future Kurdistan. Now, Assad is also saying that they have indications Jordan is planning to cross troops into the Syrian territory in coordination with the United States. So apparently Jordan is getting sucked into this quagmire as well. Meanwhile, Russia and Syria are holding talks on supplies of more air defense systems. There is a lot of speculation that the reason so many of those cruise missiles missed their intended targets is that they were successfully jammed by the very capable Russian electronic warfare systems. They just didn't have enough of them. And so Assad has said in an interview with Russian media that Moscow and Damascus are holding talks on the supplies of additional air defense systems to the war-torn country. And Assad at this point is not ruling out Russian ground troops in Syria if more terrorists continue to come into Syria from outside. We're going to take a phone call here. Joe in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there?
Seems the best I remember back in 1993 in April, Attorney General Janet Reno poked some holes in the building down in Waco, Texas. And wasn't that sarin gas they used? It was later changed. Everything you read now.
No, it was CS. It was CS gas. And
I had never heard of sarin gas until that attack in Waco.
Okay, Waco was...
And it was discussed.
Waco was done with CS gas, which is a choking gas, and it was mixed, they used as a propellant methylene chlorate, which is highly toxic. In fact, it's the chemical. Have you ever seen those plexiglass shields over the salad bars where the sides bend down? Methylene chlorate is the chemical they use to soften the plexiglass temporarily so they can bend it into the shape. And it's very, very toxic. But that's what they used to kill that church full of women and children down in Waco, Texas. And it should be remembered, CS gas is banned for use in warfare on enemy troops. So it's a banned chemical weapon.
Different.
It's a banned. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
All right.
I appreciate all you do for our community.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Okay, now over in Great Britain, in response to Boris Johnson's comment that he is prepared to ignore the parliamentary vote, saying that Britain is not going to join in an invasion of Syria, and it has prompted a huge outcry from the British people and a lot of other people in the media. Ben Harris-Quinney has put out an article saying, stay out of Syria. Warmongering is bad for Britain, and he's saying it's going to put more of a burden on the British taxpayer, and it could even impact the Brexit process. It's amazing how so many people know this oncoming war is a bad idea, and yet those behind it keep pushing. New phenomenon is taking place in Syria. Apparently, Putin has become a very popular name for new Syrian babies. So that's a solid indicator of their esteem of various world leaders. Meanwhile, over in Iraq, on the battle for Mosul, journalist Anand Gopal is describing it as the biggest humanitarian catastrophe since the original 2003 invasion. And according to the group, air wars, at least 1,782 civilians were killed last month in coalition strikes. These are civilians, 1,782 last month. So it's getting intense over there. Another story from Sputnik News. Saudi Arabia is stumbling badly in Yemen. They can't gain traction. They can't gain ground. And so now the U.S. is talking about additional support behind the Saudi forces, what they're calling more aggressive support measures. And we're hearing talk about U.S. boots on the ground in Yemen, followed by the usual official denials. The U.S. is already seriously overstretched in all of the existing wars. They can't bring any of them to a resolution. Back in 2005, when General Wesley Clark revealed this list of countries to be invaded, it was going to be done one at a time. We're going to invade Iraq, settle that down, put it under puppet control. Everything will be fine there. Then we can move everybody over into the next country, and the next country, and the next country, and the next country. It hasn't worked out that way. The U.S. is still stuck in all these wars. They're still stuck up in Afghanistan. They're still stuck in Iraq. They're still stuck in Libya. Yemen is turning into another quagmire. They've been trying to get into Syria for 6 years, and yet we still hear stories. They're going into Somalia, Sudan. They're trying to provoke North Korea. It's heading for an epic fail. We're going to lose this war. We are going to lose this war. In fact, here's confirmation from Breitbart. 300 U.S. Marines en route to a Taliban stronghold in Afghanistan. The Taliban. Gee, I seem to recall that during Charlie Wilson's war, the Taliban were our friends, our allies against the Soviets. But when they refused to sell that oil company consortium a pipeline right-of-way at a bargain basement price, they became our enemies. You don't mess with those pipelines. So, Kellyanne Conway, this thing with Iran. They're obviously pushing to try and start a war with Iran. Kellyanne Conway said earlier today, President Trump is evaluating all options when it comes to possibly pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Now, Trump did campaign on the Iran deal being a terrible deal. So he's not actually breaking his campaign promise. But the issue is here that an agreement was made with the P5+1, and Iran has kept all of their promises. Now all of a sudden we have all this tough talk about Iran this and Iran that. Article out of Sputnik News. Is all of this tough talk about Iran specifically designed to provoke Iran into doing something? And it's saying Trump's outrageous Iran move may backfire. Because right now the whole world understands. They saw this bizarre thing where Wednesday Trump said Iran is in compliance with the P5+1. Then Thursday he said, no, they're not. Then later on they clarified it, said, well, yes, they're in compliance, but they're not complying with the spirit of the agreement, which is a nonsensical statement. Agreements are what is on that piece of paper. Iran has kept all their promises, and Trump is looking for a way that the U.S. can break the agreement and make it look like it's somehow Iran's fault. And it's sending a message to every other government on earth. You cannot trust anything the U.S. government says. Even if they sign a treaty, it is not worth the paper it's written on. And that's going to make it increasingly difficult to try and find peaceful ways to resolve conflicts. And maybe that's part of the agenda. Put out this image of the U.S. government as completely untrustworthy so that other countries feel that military action is their only option. Now, Russia has just made a brilliant chess move. They're inviting Iran to become a member of the Asian Power Bloc, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes within its planning a mutual defense pact. Now, Russia's already said, if anybody attacks Iran, they're going to come on in. So we could see World War III break out over Iran. And again, we know who the aggressor is. The United States government cannot maintain this illusion that they are being put upon, that they have no choice, that they're responding to all these crises. I dare anybody to show me on a map of the United States of America where we've actually been attacked by anybody. The only threat is economic, because nations are turning away from using the U.S. dollar for global trade and banking. Will the U.S. carry out a false flag attack on their own soil? Yeah, they certainly did in New York on 9/11. And a lot of people are very worried about this upcoming training exercise that's training for a 10-kiloton nuclear warhead detonated over New York or New Jersey. And it's an interesting choice of yield on the weapon because 10 kilotons is the largest bomb North Korea currently has. 10 kilotons is considerably smaller than anything currently being used by Russia or China. So they're telegraphing the moves here. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, clashes are erupting across the West Bank. Thousands of people are protesting in solidarity with the hunger-striking Palestinian prisoners. And the prisoners are on a hunger strike because of the way prisoners are treated in Israeli prisons. where they're talking about the torture, ill treatment, medical neglect, internment without trial or charges, and the strikers are getting a lot of support, and there have been confrontations. Now, just to show you how warm and humanitarian Israelis can be, the far-right National Union Party decided to hold a barbecue right outside the prison where the Palestinians are on the hunger strike and just let the smells go through the bars to torment them. Now, speaking of Israel's politicians here, article coming out of sgtreport.com, Nikki Haley humiliates America, groveling before Israel at the AIPAC summit. Now, this is obviously a few weeks ago, but basically was just showing Israel is in charge of our country. Like all these other Middle Eastern nations, we are living under a puppet rule. We do not have a legal, legitimate, constitutional government of this land any longer. It's been taken away from us. And despite all of the support Barack Obama gave to Israel, Israel considered Obama a weak supporter because there were occasions when he wouldn't do what he was told. And they're counting on Donald Trump to be a strong supporter of Israel, and all indications are they're going to get what they want because Nikki Haley is now out there saying Trump will never allow UN resolutions condemning Israel. Israel could be dropping live kittens into a blender on puree on global television, and still the White House is going to defend them at the United Nations. Meanwhile, Israel is expediting an order for new submarines. Normally, their military procurement is a long, drawn-out process, as it is here in the United States of America. But apparently, for whatever reason, they've decided they're speeding up the request for 3 new Dolphin AIP-class submarines. They need them as fast as possible. So, okay, you American taxpayers, time to cough up more cash for Israel. Because Israel's not going to pay for this stuff themselves. I mean, that's silly. That's what you Americans are for here. Now, as long as everybody's buying and selling weapons in advance of the big party, Turkey says they are close to an S-400 missile purchase deal with Russia. One of the downsides for the American defense industry of what's been going on over Syria is a demonstration that Russian weapons are less expensive and more effective. And Russia is starting to capture a larger and larger share of the global weapons market. And that S-400 is a very, very capable air defense missile. Meanwhile, the U.S. is trying to basically catch up at this point and modernize. And so they're resurrecting an old weapon called the kinetic energy projectile. And this is a tungsten warhead that is fired at 3 times the speed of sound, which basically can obliterate everything in its path. Once it's launched, it bursts into these flaming tungsten metal fragments that can pierce through most armor, such as that used in tanks. And they're bringing that one back here. Meanwhile, the Marine Corps is going to get their new King Stallion heavy lift helicopter. And it can carry 2 armored Humvees at once. It's a follow-on to the Super Stallion, which has been in service since 1981. And here's the kicker. This new King Stallion heavy lift helicopter actually costs more than an F-35. Ooh, money, 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 profit, 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 profit. Okay. Getting a message from our control room. Now, here's a very, very good question. This is coming out of RINF.com. And after all this talk about Russia trying to interfere with our internal politics and everything, apparently somebody asked a longtime Democratic Party insider. Actually, I'm going to save this until after the break, because it's a good question. It deserves careful thought and response. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to the news here, apparently somebody's been trying to call the show from France, and we had a little bit of a goof with our phone system trying to execute the transfer. So please try and call back in, and we'll try and get you on the air here. We're dealing with old equipment, broken equipment, not really working. Highest quality of American manufacturer equipment, and it's really a problem. And it does wear out very, very quickly. Alrighty, getting on back to this, we were talking about this story that was over in RINF.com, and the author of the piece asked a longtime Democratic Party insider, who was actually working on the investigation into whether Russia was trying to interfere with our internal politics, and asked which country interferes the most in U.S. politics. And without a moment's hesitation, this Democratic Party insider said Israel. Of course, everybody knows it. Israel runs the place. But there's no probe of Israel Gate, is there? They're angry with Russia. Russia's cutting in on Israel's action inside the United States of America, and that cannot be allowed. Now, Israel is starting to struggle. Their much cultivated image of perpetual victimhood is starting to come apart. Story out of the electronic intifada is talking about how over in Barcelona, the city council passed a declaration on Wednesday upholding the right to boycott Israel over its violations of Palestinian rights. And it also admonishes Israel for its intransigence in the face of repeated warnings from the international community to stop its illegal colonization of Palestinian land. And, of course, Israel's government is out there screaming, "Oh, you filthy anti-Semites, you anti-Semites." Now, here's the good news. According to a top anti-BDS strategist, Gidi Grinstein, the BDS campaign is actually winning. And Israel has thrown a huge amount of money and media propaganda and political pressure trying to stop it, and it's still gaining ground. And Grinstein was saying they're spending tens of millions of dollars trying to combat BDS, and BDS is still gaining. Well, a couple of reasons. Israel is in the wrong, morally and legally. And two, the idea that you can get people to go along with your agenda, no matter how brutal and offensive it is, just by spending enough money on advertising, those days are over. If there is one thing the Internet and the independent media have succeeded in doing, the one victory we can point to, we have taken away from government, corporate media, their ability to lie to the public with impunity. We have created a very skeptical global population that accepts nothing coming from that TV set, radio, or newspaper at face value. For the vast majority of the human race, the first assumption is, where is the lie in what we are being shown or told? Now, as you know, members of Congress are winding up their Easter break in their districts, and they've been holding town hall meetings trying to at least pretend they're still listening to their constituents. But apparently a website honoring former President Barack Obama is providing progressives with information and tools to disrupt these town hall meetings. So it's rather interesting. Barack Obama is still involved in politics behind the scenes, but he's still very much involved here. Now, a lot of people are scratching their heads over what's happening with House Oversight Committee Chair Jason Chaffetz, who, with almost no warning, announced he was not going to run for re-election, just said he wanted more personal time, which usually means pressures being put on him that he can't talk about. Threats, blackmail, we don't know. And now, all of a sudden, we're hearing that he may step down from his chair before the end of his term. It seems to me like the criminals in our government, our criminal government, are trying to get rid of anybody who's trying to conduct an honest investigation into what's going on. And I predict they're going to try and find some way to go after Trey Gowdy and get him kicked out next. Now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is confirming that arresting Julian Assange is now a priority for the United States. Because we're going to get that man. We're going to get him. He's the top priority. I mean, let's forget about all the rapists and muggers and cyber criminals and everything, but they're going to get Assange here. And so what we have here is this very bizarre situation of the U.S. mafia, the U.S. government, are out to arrest Assange for exposing Hillary Clinton's crimes, but they refused to arrest Hillary Clinton for committing those crimes. Now, you just think about that one for a while, and then come back and tell me that I'm wrong, that organized crime has succeeded in taking over our entire government. Now, okay, let's see. We're going to take a phone call now. Tim in France, glad you got back here. You're on the air. What is on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Greetings from Brittany, and glad to talk to you. Okay, I was going to give you the latest on the French elections, but I had sort of one thing I want to check out with you first.
Yes.
Okay. The fact that with all of the Trump's about face or sellout, what do you call it, the alternative movement has now been divided into at least 3 different groups. And whether it's the first that consider Trump has been completely turned for whatever reason, and well, you and I probably belong to that category.
Yes.
The second category would be those that are still completely scamped and have probably liked his show of force in Korea and Syria. And the third are people that are sort of 50-50, approving his domestic policy and against his international intervention, like Alex Jones is doing the splits on an ever-widening chasm of public opinion. But the point I want to bring out is that it seems to have sort of driven a wedge into the alternative movement and sort of a divide-and-conquer strategy, and it's taken completely the wind out of the sails from the 2016 awakening.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Now, the good news is that those who are still think Trump is great and that somehow or other Trump is keeping his campaign promises is a rapidly dwindling minority. So we're not far away from being an independent media that's split in two, which is what we had last year, because a lot of the independent media was behind Hillary Clinton, and the rest of us were behind, well, we weren't really behind Trump, at least in my case. It was more a case of being opposed to Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm. Okay, French elections?
Okay, we just had something shake the building. That's why I'm looking startled. Anyway, yes, the French elections.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, this article that came out about the 500,000 voters on 2 lists, it probably doesn't really mean that much, because it's more of a bureaucratic logjam than it is any kind of intentional for throwing the elections.
Well, I don't think we can assume that here. And what is really alarming is that the French election authorities are saying they're not even going to investigate this until after the election is over and they've got the results, which means if Marine Le Pen loses, the investigation's probably going to go away.
Yes, but there's also a 3 to 5 year prison sentence and a 15,000 euro fine for anybody that is convicted for voting in 2 places. So the French bureaucracy will eventually catch up with them, even if it isn't right away.
I thought these 500,000 votes went to French citizens in other countries.
No.
No? Okay, well, that's a story I saw yesterday.
No, what it is when you move to a new place,
yes,
you fill out the forms for your new home, and then the local government will transmit this to a central agency, which will then contact your old living town, and they will strike you from the lists. And so the logjam is in this central agency that is overbooked, or what do you call it?
Well, I'd like to withhold judgment on this. Obviously, the elections are starting this Sunday. Marine Le Pen is clearly favored to win, but if there's a sudden, weird, mysterious reversal, then we have to start looking for vote fraud, because we have seen so much of it, and it's out in the open. It's almost like the vote riggers don't even care if we see it anymore or not.
Yeah, I can give you the latest official polling numbers, and then I can go about how it's really difficult to fix French elections with paper ballots, if you want.
Okay.
Well, Okay, the latest polls that came out today, and then the polls are closed tonight, so they won't get any more. First of all, there's a 73% voting, what they call participation in France anyway, 7% abstention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Macron has 24.5%. Le Pen is at 22.5%. François Fillon, who's the sort of the continuation of Sarkozy, is 19.5%, and then you have Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who's at 18.5%, and he's sort of a left wing. He's also against the European, but he wants to go through a vote to do that. Okay.
Well, again, when you're talking about official polling numbers, we know that those two cannot be trusted. All last year, we had all these polls assuring us Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide, and it absolutely did not happen. So we'll have to see the results of the elections. But it is really very frustrating to live in a world where you absolutely cannot trust anything you're getting from government or the media, and it's very angering, in fact.
Yes. Okay, but the thing is, in France, where you use paper ballots, have transparent ballot boxes, and control everybody that's voting, it's very difficult to flip the votes. Most of the subtle manipulation would have come before that with just newspaper articles oriented for this or this candidate. And the second thing I wanted to say is the second round, if Le Pen passes, it's something like a 60-40% going towards Emmanuel Macron anyway, who's more or less of Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan backed candidate, and he also attended a Jesuit high school, and he married wound up marrying his English teacher.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the information and the update. But we know that it's definitely a common feature all across the EU that elections are being rigged to keep Eurosceptics out of power. The British police are now saying that Nigel Farage lost his election to election fraud as well. So it's rampant, it's epidemic, and we just need to be aware of it. It sounds like you have a better election system than we do here in the United States of America. And my question would be, are the votes actually counted in public, or is there like a central counting center behind closed doors?
Yes. Okay. What I would say is that I was actually polled for one of these things. Somebody dropped by the house to have me answer the questions, and they said something like, many people are refusing to answer the polls, which means they want to keep their vote. They don't want to make it public anyway, and this could be one of the X factors in this election.
Okay.
Okay. And just the last thing is, if you ever continue with your idea to do election reform project, I'd be willing to sit down and trade ideas with you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I'll put up that How to Have Honest Elections article again on the webpage on this next commercial break, and you can send me your commentary on it.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I'll keep listening to you.
All right.
Carry on the work.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here, and the phone lines are open. Now, getting on back to William Sessions saying that we have to get Julian Assange. We're going to arrest him for exposing Hillary Clinton's crimes, even though we're not arresting Hillary Clinton for having committed the crimes. And we all remember that the news conference with FBI Director Comey. He went down the list of all the felony violations of Title 18 Hillary Clinton did and then said, we're not going to arrest her. But they're going to get Assange. Now, the good news is Marine Le Pen is saying if she wins the presidency of France, she will grant both Julian Assange and Edward Snowden either citizenship or asylum. And they will have some place where they can live. Let's face it, if you're having to live in exile, France is not a bad place to be. And hopefully that will come to pass. And I hope Marine Le Pen wins and that she doesn't turn out to be as big a disappointment as Donald Trump did. Now then, we're getting more and more propaganda to bash Russia, and incidentally, to bash the independent media in this country. So there's this article that came out of Reuters, and basically it says that they have been shown 2 documents drawn up by a Putin-linked think tank to sway the 2016 U.S. election. And of course, they're not revealing where they got the documents. There's nobody confirming the documents are authentic. Just take Reuters' word for it. And the first document was a strategy paper that basically said they were going to use social media, that's us, to encourage U.S. voters to elect a president who would take a softer line on Russia, which Trump was saying he was going to do, but hasn't. The second document basically said that they were going to talk about the election fraud going on in this country to damage the system's legitimacy. And this is a rehash of the claim that the independent media are all agents of Russian intelligence services, as well as trying to sell you the idea that anybody who says we don't have honest elections in this country is obviously a goofball, wingnut, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy kook that you should ignore. Forgetting that Hillary Clinton said the election was rigged when she lost, along with the lady who called for Jill Stein said it was rigged. And they did find election fraud all over the country, all of it favoring Hillary Clinton. Out in Nevada, they're discovering there was a huge problem with illegal immigrants voting in this election. So this idea that ignore the claims of election fraud because it's a Russian plot, it's desperation on the cusp of madness. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And that shaking that interrupted our show here, turns out we had another earthquake. And so Madam Pelly is getting restive here. All righty. Rather interesting and revealing story coming out of Investment Watch blog. As you know, starting back with President Bill Clinton, they started cordoning off more and more of the White House area. There used to be a road that went in front. It's been converted to a sidewalk. And the sidewalk that goes along the south fence of the White House has been closed nightly from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. since 2015. Now it's to be closed permanently. So apparently somebody is concerned that Donald Trump is angering the American people. But I think we need to understand something. The lesson of Donald Trump is that the actual occupant of the White House isn't the real power in this country anymore. And attempting to do anything to him, even with the recently displayed deficiencies of the Secret Service, there's no point to it. There's no point to it at all. If I were for some reason to be meeting Donald Trump, I'd shake his hand and say hello, and I'd say, I'm disappointed in you. But there's not much point in doing anything else, is there? Let's talk about the corporate media. Story coming out of, again, Investment Watch blog, talking about how Fox News is being turned into a progressive newscaster, in other words, liberal. And apparently James Murdoch is engineering to turn Fox into just another CNN. We saw Roger Ailes being kicked out, now Bill O'Reilly. And all they're going to succeed in doing is driving more and more people to the independent media. Because everybody knows the corporate media cannot be trusted. They certainly lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons. And we always need to remember that, and we always need to remind others of it. They started a war with a lie. And once people understand and accept that, you start to realize all the lies, all the wars are started with lies. And they're trying to do it again. Now, you remember that Huffington Post article that said it was time to take voting rights away from white men to punish them for all the evil they've done in the world. And it turned out to be written by a South African man posing as a feminist activist. And he got the Huntington Post to publish this. And it was a hoax. And Huffington Post did publish it. Their editors defended it from criticism before they realized that they'd been hoaxed. Well, apparently, I'm going to save the rest of this story until after the station identification. We'll be right back.